Hello, everyone. I'm Tabea Kaiser from telc Language Tests, and I'm very happy to guide you through our today's webinar. Laura is working with telc since 2010, mainly as an examiner trainer and test author. And she's also helping us with product designing and different digital projects, such as telc from school to job, which is our first online exam for school pupils. And additionally, she was part of a small telc team that designed an adaptive mobile placement test, which is being used in many universities around the world.
Thanks very much, Tabea. Okay, everyone. Hi. As Tabea said, my name is Laura Edwards. In Germany. I'm from, well, not from Germany, as you may hear. I am from Ireland originally, and I have lived now in Germany for about 14 years. It was supposed to be for 6 months. And then, I had fun, and I don't know how it happened, but I'm still here. And so today we're going to be talking about how we teach when teaching online. And this is such a hot topic at the moment for all of us because of the situation we find ourselves in. And while many people may think, well, countries are lifting restrictions, it's all over now, I think that's a mistake, and we should take time to reflect on what we've done and how we can make things better going forward. All right, so that's it. The question is not so much today about what tools we use. The question is the tools are one element when we're teaching online, but another important factor is what about our methods? What about the teaching itself? And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So I am somebody who, maybe you share my love too, I love inspirational quotes. I know not everybody does. Some people find them very cheesy. I love them. And I find them, they're very, very useful in a difficult situation, when you need a bit of motivation or, inspiration. So when we got into this situation, COVID-19, I started looking online for some inspirational quotes about crisis. And this is the first one I found. Don't wait until you're in a crisis to come up with a crisis plan. Okay, so for most of us, we may say, well, that's not really relevant. We were not prepared. Suddenly this crisis hit us. Very few of us were really, had a crisis plan. It's too late, you could say. We were in the crisis before we knew it. However, it's a good tip for going forward. The crisis is not over. We don't know what's coming in the future. And even if things improve, this is a perfect opportunity to stop, reflect, and look to the future and make our crisis plan now. If something like this happens again, are we prepared? Will we be prepared? Very good. So, reflecting. Many of my colleagues, I teach now myself, I asked you, but I teach mostly university students or adults. The adults would be in a business setting, and the university students tend to be business English too. And I work with people of all, teaching economics and law and things like that. And for many of them, I see that they, here in Germany, they're feeling like, oh, it's over. Yeah. And they want to go back as quickly as possible to the way things were. You do think it's a mistake. Yeah. But I know you're not going to make a mistake because you're here with me today. So you too are planning for the future. So we're making our crisis plan. Okay. Here's another quote. I know you're going to be sick of them by the end. So a crisis often brings out the best in you, and you discover qualities that you never knew existed within. It's definitely more uplifting than the last one. We found ourselves in this situation that we never expected. And it was very stressful for everybody, of course. But through this, we learn, and we are learning so much and finding And that's what we're going to talk about today. Qualities, strengths, and skills that we never knew we had. And so this is something that we should celebrate. Okay. What are the challenges that we are facing, have faced, and continue to face? So these are some of the usual ones that have come to mind when we think of this current situation. So we'd have to arrange ways for the students to learn remotely. Many people didn't have anything set up. Suddenly, from one week to the next, schools were closed, and we had to find ways of teaching our students without the classroom. Very stressful. We had to get to grips with new technology. That's not easy. I myself have a master's in technology and education and have years of online experience. Yet the school I work for, they decided to go for one piece of technology, a tool that I had no experience with. So even the people with a lot of experience all have to get to grips with new technology, and it is stressful considering the circumstances. And then the other thing is we had to convert our materials and lesson plans for online teaching. As we're going to talk about later, that might be very difficult for some people, depending on the way you teach. And we're doing all of that while at the same time we're dealing with the stress and the mental pressure, our own feelings of shock and anxiety. We're worried about our family, our students. We're worried about friends. We're worried about the future, what's going to happen. We're concerned for our students' well-being. How are they coping? How are they dealing? You may have students who don't have the technological resources to participate, really, or this may have been a big issue for you. So we had worries for our students. And then for many people, especially freelancers, things like that, you have the worry about the loss of income. What happens? What happens when the students stop coming to the schools? Well, the teachers are not needed. And so this is very stressful. Okay, so we're all these different things. So we had to think about, okay, so the challenges. We have to recognize that we are under an awful lot of stress. We can't be superhuman, We try to do everything perfect, but sometimes this is an unusual situation. Okay, so this is my best quote. Let perseverance be your engine and hope your fuel. It's a good one, isn't it? As well as a bit of effort and perseverance, we need patience and hope, and we need humor, and we need self-compassion. Yeah, we're going to make mistakes. We have to forgive ourselves to get through this time. But along the way, we will discover, as I mentioned before, these skills and talents and these strengths in yourself that you didn't know you had. Yeah, so there are positive things to see in this, as bad as it is. So my first message to you today really is about your own well-being. It is a global pandemic. We were not prepared for this. We couldn't be prepared for it. So look after yourself, yeah, and give yourself a break. You're doing a great job. You're doing the best you can, yeah? Okay, so that's the first thing, our well-being. Now on to the technology. So familiarizing yourself with technology, for many people, it was the tricky part, how to get the best, how to make this all work, So really it is a matter of trial and error. That's all it is. Tabea and I had a practice run yesterday using this tool, as it was something I wasn't so familiar with. And we really had to practice. I had lots of stupid questions. That's the way it is, I'm used to other webinar tools. So it's trial and error. You find tutorials online. There's a lot of help on YouTube and sites like that where you can find other people who've made videos. It's really, really useful. Of course, practice. Whatever the tool it is that you've chosen, so many different ones on the market, practice on family and friends. If you want to try something out with your students, but you're a bit nervous about trying it with 30 students, why not practice it on family members first? They can be your guinea pigs, so to say. Okay. And the great thing is fall back on your support network. Friends and colleagues, other teachers will all have had ups and downs, and they'll have all advice and experiences that they can share with you. And that's very helpful to have that network. Sometimes, particularly I work mostly as a freelancer, sometimes we think we're on our own, and we forget to reach out. Okay, thank you, Tabea. She's moving my PowerPoint for me. Yes, it is. We are moving on. So that's
Sorry.
just about no worries. That's just about the technology. You know, we're leading in now to what it's like to teach online, the actual teaching. Okay. Perhaps if you are teaching one-to-one classes, then teaching online, whatever tool you've chosen, I mean, there's so many from Skype and Zoom and Microsoft Teams, etc., whatever you've chosen, if it's one or two students, then maybe the difference between the classroom and online teaching is not so great. But I think anyone who has like more than three will tell you that face-to-face instruction and online instruction are very, very different. And they've different challenges. Numerous studies show that online teaching requires a different pedagogy and different skill sets. It's a skill set than face-to-face. So in many ways, we're like the little rocket there going off to space. We're exploring new frontiers, yeah? We are heading off there in the world, trying something new. So there are many pedagogical issues. It's a fact. Teaching online is something completely different than teaching face-to-face. Yeah. So these are some of the issues that you have to face. Managing student interactions. When you're in the classroom, yeah, they're all there, they're all in front of you, pair them up, put them into groups. People can, we have the visual clues, very, very easy to read the room, etc. It's very difficult how we manage their interactions. Another issue is designing suitable lesson material, as we've already mentioned. We're going to talk about that. Delivering lesson materials. Yeah, how do you do it? Some schools had devices or had systems set up for this, but many other people had no method. They didn't know how to do it. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that after. Now, the next one's a bit tricky. Redefining performance expectations for you and for the students. This is something that a lot of people found very tricky. I know myself that the timing of a lesson face-to-face and online are very different. If I have a big group or a small group, and then face-to-face or online, it's very different. My expectations of what I should get done during a lesson, what I expect to achieve, I have to change this. It's not one-to-one, Also the students, how they perform. It can be very frustrating. I'm going to talk about that later, when sometimes online they're quiet or they're not participating the way you want them to. So we have to rethink this. It is, as I said, different medium. We have different expectations. The other thing is we're dealing with new methods of communication. How do you let the students know that there's homework, or how do you communicate with them what you want them to do outside of the classroom? And this is something, for example, I have a daughter, she's 7, and she's at a school up the road here from me in Düsseldorf. And her school had difficulties. The kids maybe are too young to use Zoom, etc. They also don't have their own email addresses. Some parents also don't have email addresses, Then there's the language difficulty. Writing in German to families that may not be German speaking. There's a lot of tricky things regarding how we communicate with each other, how we let them know when the class will take place and what the expectations are. And then another issue is assessment techniques. This is something we can talk about later on, definitely. But this is a big problem. This is something a lot of people contacted me in the last few months about, to ask, how do we examine our students? How do we test them when we're online? If it's a small group, of course, it might be easy. But for example, in my groups, I have 30 to 40 students. Yeah, a challenge. Online, how do you test them? We have to think of different methods. So we're going to talk about that later. So recognize that there are many, many different pedagogical issues that we face. Now, don't let this depress you. Yeah, just because it's about pedagogical issues doesn't mean that teaching online is like a poor replacement for face-to-face teaching. Not at all. It's a different beast. It's a different thing. We have to recognize it as such. Yeah. And when we view it as different, it's a starting point for our success. If we view it as the same as classroom teaching, And then we're going to get into difficulties and we're going to feel bad, or we may not teach to our best advantage, or to our best method. So recognize the issues, but also remember the opportunities. So be positive. So there are many opportunities. I just want to say, actually, before we move on, I did 2 master's degrees online from English universities. Now I'm in Germany and I wouldn't have had, I also had a small child at home. I was a baby my child was a baby when I was doing the first master's. I hadn't got the opportunity to go to classes. It wasn't possible. Yet I was able to use my Elternside to get a master's degree because of online teaching. I could be at home, be with my child. I didn't have to go anywhere. For me, I'm a huge fan. I will let you know. I see opportunity for participation across the board. As long as you have the internet or you have some device, you can attend and you can find classes. For example, I picked the perfect master's for me. I was in Germany, but it was in England, but there was no barrier. Online teaching made it possible. So I'm a huge fan, just laying that out there in advance. So as I said, it offers a lot of opportunities, but because of these issues, we have to maybe change our ways a little. So the first thing we have to do is define what our ways are. What is your way of teaching? This is probably the most important question of all. For success in online teaching is first define, how does learning happen in your classroom? We're all different. We're in different countries. We're in different contexts, as you already told me in the chat box, from kids and teens, Hungarian, German, English, universities, adults. We're all teaching different situations. Some might be teaching one-to-one and small groups. Others might be teaching big groups, as I said. So there's no perfect way that suits all. So the first thing is you have to say, how does learning happen in my classroom? So I'm going to tell you about mine. As I mentioned earlier, I have large groups. These are adults in their 20s to 30s. Most of them are returning to education, having worked for a few years. They did some kind of apprenticeship, they worked in a company or in their field, and now they're coming back. They want to get a higher qualification or a bachelor's degree. So it's a little bit different from the average 18-year-old going to university. Mine, as I said, are anything from 25 to 35, sometimes even 40 years of age and up, and they've been working for years. So in my class, I have to try and do things that tap into their knowledge and expertise. They know more about being out in the working world, in the different fields than I do. So the way I plan my classes is I have to try and make sure that I discuss. So there's a lot of interaction from them. They give me a lot of information. So I would incorporate a lot of pair work, group discussions, brainstorming, a lot of projects where they show me about their skills or their field, and we do a lot of peer feedback. And as I said, I'm trying to tap into the knowledge that they have in their fields. Now, if I was teaching young learners, it might be a little bit different. I might try projects, but obviously my expectations would be different. Pair work and group work with young learners, and they're all different. So you have to say to yourself, when I'm in the classroom, when I'm teaching, what's my style? What fits my learners best? How does learning happen? One thing you see, a lot of people who switched to online learning, they suddenly went from having a very lively, very communicative classroom to suddenly it all being about worksheets. That's a big switch for the learners. We're going to talk about that after. It's stressful for them. If they're used to one way, they love one style, and suddenly it was all about worksheets being sent home to them and having to send back, it's totally different. And also you're losing the essence of what your learning style is, your teaching style, I mean. So when we go online, it's very important to remember what it is you love to do. And then we try to bring that over and try to see how can the tool we pick facilitate these things. So we are not the slaves to the tool. I know it feels like it at the beginning. We are not the slaves. The tool is there to be used by us, and we will find the ways to make it work as we want it to work. Some people say, oh, no, I can't. The tool doesn't let me do this, but there are always ways around it. Okay, very good. So this is my next point, the adaptability struggle. So this is a thing. This is an official thing. There has been research. Now I forget the name of the, I wrote it down and his name is gone. Adaptability struggle is about the feeling of switching from the traditional classroom environment to online learning, especially in our situation where many of the students didn't want to learn online. I mentioned my master's degrees. I chose to learn online. That was the condition, I was excited about that style of learning. However, in our case, many of our students were forced to switch. They had no choice. And there is an adaptability struggle. It can be overwhelming for them. They need time to grow and to become accustomed to these new technologies and the new methods, the new teaching. You know yourself. If it's a mistake to just say, oh, the young people, they're easy with it. They're not. It's not. There is this stress that goes on, this adaptability struggle. And many students might reject it. They had no control. So this is also like a change, the stress of change, I've had one-to-one students who said, one-to-one, this would be perfect. We just have a Skype class, it's so easy. But they didn't want that. So there is stress. It was adaptability, and we can't force them, all of them, to love it just because we say it's good, So you have to give them time to get through this. Now, how we can do it is talking to our students about it. So talking to them about the advantages of online learning, asking them for their opinion, and regularly checking up. I had a student who on the day one, he's a little bit older, he was in a group class, and I asked everyone, how are you feeling about online learning? And he was the first to reply. It was in the chat box, and he wrote, I hate it, in caps. It was very clear. His feelings were very clear. Now, as time went on, I checked in regularly. Every few weeks, I'd say, well, guys, how are you feeling now? Now we've been doing this for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. What are you feeling now? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? What would you like to do more or less of, etc. So this regular checking in with them is very important. We're stressed, but we must remember they're stressed too. Okay, asking their opinion, they might present themselves with benefits that you never thought of. For example, I mentioned myself as a parent, and also my partner, he works in the theatre. So he works evenings and weekends, and has like 1 week he might be off on a Monday evening, and then or a Monday, the next week it's Tuesday. I can't go to a weekly class. Well, kids a bit older now, it's easier. But when she was small, I couldn't say, oh, I'm going to yoga every Tuesdays and I'm going to German class every Thursdays. I had no one to look after her. I'd have to get a babysitter. So for me, online teaching has opened up the world. It has allowed me to be at home and be the mom and still have access with everything. So it mightn't be for you relevant, but some of your students might have stories that you hadn't even thought about how the online learning is a positive experience. So asking them is very useful. And as I said, checking in with them regularly. Okay, there are advantages, but how do we adapt is the next question with the little adaptability struggle there. So this is the SAMR model, which anybody who studies technology and learning will all have heard of this or whatever. It comes up very often. It's not that old. I think it's only about 10 years old or so, this model by, I think, Ruben Puentedura. And the SAMR stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. And the idea of it is to evaluate the potential or actual use of technology. How are we using the technology? So remember, we're in control. The tech is not controlling us. So how are we using the technology? So this model is I'm going to refer to it a few times, so it's quite useful. The first level is substitution. And it means the tech acts as a direct tool substitute with no functional change. So an example of this would be if I typed, instead of writing a letter by hand, if I typed it out. Maybe on a typewriter, say, just typing out a letter. There's no change there. I just substituted handwriting for typing. Augmentation is one step up. Augmentation is where the tech acts as a direct tool substitute, but there is some functional improvement. So take the idea of my handwritten letter. I've now typed it, but I'm using word processing tool like Word or whatever it is you use. Now I can have spell check and I can have formatting tools. So the formatting tools allow the writing to be much better. So it's very simple. You're still the same. You're still typing a letter, but the tool gives you the chance to spell check and grammar check and format it and make it look nicer. Now, the two of these still are just about enhancing. The technology is enhancing a little bit our use. There's not so much of a change. The next two steps higher up, modification and redefinition, these are about transforming. So we'll have a look. Modification, the tech allows for significant task redesign. Okay, so the tech allows you to do something you couldn't have done as well with the first model. So modification, imagine now if I started using Google Docs and I invite some of you guys to join and use the doc with me. You can be in the UK, in Nepal, in Hungary, wherever, and me here, wherever we are, or in Athens, wherever, and we can all work on the doc together simultaneously. Now that is a big change to what would have happened previously. Previously, I would have worked on my Word doc. I would have sent it first to Budapest and asked you to have a look at it. Then you would have sent it on to Athens and asked them. It would have been a more laborious process. But now, this tech tool, for example, Google Docs or whatever, I think Word, Microsoft does it now, the online version, you have significant task redesign. Collaboration is possible in a much different way. It's just one example. Finally, the redefinition. That is when you use a piece of technology to, tech allows for the creation of new tasks previously inconceivable. Yesterday, my kid, she's going mad into Greek myths at the moment, and she was reading about the Minotaur and the labyrinth. And I needed to do a bit of work and I needed her to be busy. So I said, why don't you build a labyrinth out of your Lego? And so Grant, old school, the Lego. So she built a labyrinth. Well, I knew it was a labyrinth, but anyway, she built a labyrinth. She had a lion as the Minotaur and she had a few other little guys. But what she did was she took her dad's iPad and she filmed, I don't know how she did it. She filmed her movie story, telling the story of the Minotaur, with the Lego. Now, that was amazing. And that is an example of redefinition. Now we can send the video to grandma, who would be so proud of her little grandchild. But that is an example of the tech creating something that wasn't possible before. So we see it in our lives all the time when we try something new. I had a different example. I'm trying to look at my notes here. What was my example for that redefinition? Oh, yeah. Well, it was making a video presentation which you share online. Okay, mine was, so something like that. A few of you mentioned getting your students to do speeches or debates or presentations. Now they could use the technology to find a global audience, and that would be redefinition. So this is important because it makes us think, what am I doing? Am I just substituting? Am I augmenting here? Am I modifying? Am I redefining? Now it's okay if all you want to do is enhance, use the first two steps, the substitution and the augmentation. Nobody's asking you to really redefine, that's the goal for the future. Right now, we're doing the best we can. But the SAMR model is very useful because it makes us ask different questions. Instead of saying, like, what does the tech let me do? It's what do I want to do? We're turning it around. Okay. So helps us reflect on how we can use the tools to help the learners reach their goals. If we're using a video communication tool, like the different ones we mentioned, we should ask ourselves, how can we redesign our lessons to take the best advantage of all the things the tool offers? Some of you already mentioned, I noticed in the chat, breakout rooms. So that is one example. You're really using the possibility of the tool to bring the best advantage. Okay, moving on. So here is a little example of a simple way of using the tool. If we take our video call tool, our video communication tool, a simple idea of how to take what it offers to redesign our lesson. So you invite a guest speaker to your class. Now, this is something you couldn't really do in your classroom without the video conferencing tool. You know, if you're living, for example, you're teaching English in a place where there's not many other English, or, you know, there's no English speakers there, it's very hard for you to ask somebody to come into the classroom and give a talk or interact with your students. However, with the power of the video conferencing tool, nothing is impossible. You can have guest speakers from all over the world. And it doesn't have to be Mark Zuckerberg or, I don't know, you know, some high person. It can be your cousin who lives in Florida, or, you know, a colleague or something like that. And it doesn't have to be a huge, big formal thing. It can be very informal. Yeah. Yeah, I usually get my sisters to come in. You know, they're my sisters, so they can't deny me this. But I say to them, it'll be 10 minutes. Yeah, often it goes a little bit longer, but just say, come for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, we'll, you know, bring you into the call, and my students can do very different things. So these are some of the things that the students can do. For example, they could research the guest speaker on LinkedIn. So I gave the example of my sisters. One of them works in the music industry, in PR, and the other works in marketing. She's a marketing manager for a tech company. So I would say to my students, okay, find out a little bit about them so you can have some questions to ask. So when you go on LinkedIn or whatever it is, and you see, oh, Laura's sister has been 5 years in a marketing company, producing a company that produces XYZ, then they can sort of think, oh, how did you get into marketing? What did you like about this company? Or what interests you on this product? So first they do a bit of research. Then they write an email collectively or in pairs, whatever way you want to do it. And then you can, or do it all, you know, together, inviting the guest speaker to join, saying why you're interested in speaking to them. Then once they have got the letter back or email back saying, yes, I will join, they design questions to ask based on their research. Then they plan who asks what. So this is a collaborative task, and they could volunteer, or I don't know how you can do it, but you can get them to assign the roles. Okay, you will ask this question, you will ask this question, etc. Or you are the moderator, you know, etc., whatever way. Carry out the interview, write a thank you email after. If you've got permission, if it's okay, you may record the interview, or the interview, and you could watch that back again to review the language that had been used. I mean, there's many things you could do with that. You could create comprehension questions. My God, you could type out some of the script and make a gap fill so that they watch it again and then fill in the gaps. So many things you could do with that. Instead of, recording could be video recording, but it could also be an audio recording. If the person's not so happy about video, maybe they prefer audio. It's just an idea. And finally, the students would write a report based on what they learned, be it alone or in a group, whatever. So all of that just from a short interview. And as I said, it doesn't have to be somebody, my sisters are special, just in case they're listening. But you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be like, oh, you managed, you know, some Olympic gold medal winner or some politician. It can be really somebody from your family, someone from your friends circle. The goal is the students are engaged and active and want to communicate. They want to participate in this language activity. I mean, come on, it's a lot more exciting than a worksheet. Yeah, that's just one idea. And as I said, this is an example of enhancing your technology. So the SAMR model, again, just to refer back to it, it reminds us to be open to opportunities that are presented by the technology. So we could just use the technology to say two-way communication, me and my students, but wouldn't that be, I don't know, a pity? We have such a great opportunity here, you know, if you're inviting people in, why not invite someone new? And you can sit back and watch all this learning happen. Great feeling. Okay. The SAMR model exactly is helping us to see that there are ways of taking the tool and enhancing our teaching and our learning by using the tool to its best advantages. It's not tool is not something, or online teaching is not something we just tolerate until we can go back to the classroom. There's so many opportunities. As you can see, I'm enthusiastic. Yeah, back to my quotes. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. So true. We are not going back, we are going forward. On a side note, somebody told me that Albert Einstein is apparently the most misquoted person online, and that 90% of the things that you find online as an Albert Einstein quote are not actually Albert Einstein at all. But anyway, I still like the quote. Yeah? It's not ruining my enjoyment. Okay, but reminder, we're moving forward. We're taking everything we learned and we're bringing that with us and moving forward. We're not going back to the old ways. We will take something with us even when we return to the classroom. Okay, so moving is the theme, moving online. Now, are my students even listening? This is something that many people have talked to me about. So we said that there are issues. We mentioned this. There's many different issues. And I mentioned earlier that one of the big changes is you can't read the room the same way. As I said, I had groups of like 30 something, and we were using one tool that didn't allow for me to see everybody. I could only see the last few people who spoke. There was no way of seeing the faces of all of them. Yeah. And so I couldn't even see, I couldn't even read their expressions. That I was blind, you know. And of course, in the room, it's more than just what we say. We communicate so much in our body language, facial gestures, etc. In the energy, you feel the energy in the room, and you know, oh, they're getting this, they're loving it, or something's not going right here, you know. And we're missing that when we're teaching online. So that's difficult. When we're all in the one space, things might be a little bit easier. And many teachers noticed and have mentioned to me that they may see online, especially at the beginning, a decrease in verbal participation on the part of the students. Things seem quieter. And many students say, oh my God, are they even paying attention? Are they even listening? Are they interested? It's very hard. Yeah, it's a switch. We have to change how we gauge this. But it could be, it doesn't have to be they're not interested. They could be shy. They could be uncomfortable with the new technology. They might be having tech issues. They might be unsure if or when they should communicate. They might be being polite. They don't want to be the only one that keeps speaking. So they stay quiet to allow someone else a chance to talk. You don't know this. And of course, it might make you feel very unsure. Oh, this is happening. You don't know what's going on. Yeah. So what can we do about this reduced verbal participation? So here, I'm going to give you some very practical tips. Okay, so we'll start with the small talk. You just have to, as I said before, you have to change the way you teach. As we're not in the same circumstances and same sort of environment, we have to focus on how can we get them to communicate a bit more and to make sure that they feel comfortable about communicating. So at the start of each lesson, greet the students individually and ask them a question. You can have them, if it's a small group, they can speak it, or you can ask them in the chat box just to say a few words or write a few words. So it could be something very simple, what they had for lunch, what the weather is like where they are, what they did yesterday, the usual ones. So even if it's not related to the topic of your lesson, it's just a little bit of small talk. It's a way of warming up, but also it's a tech check, of course. Suddenly, like me, I thought I was speaking at the beginning and Tabea said, no, we can't hear you. It happens to the best of us. So a little tech check, but also this small talk, this chance just to tell something about our lives is building community. And this is something very important when we're online. We need to make the students feel not like that they're just an individual sitting in a room at home, staring at a screen, but that they're part of a group. Yeah, very important. So building community with these small little questions. You can ask them to speak and go through the list, or just ask them to write something and then pick out a few people and then ask them a follow-up question. Okay, it lets them get comfortable, get to know what's happening, and also gives them a chance to try things out. They get more comfortable with it as time goes on. So the second thing is very important. I had a colleague, he was going crazy. Oh, the students, they don't react. They didn't do what he wanted them to do. And I said, but did you tell them that you wanted them to reply? he posted comments, some nice comments on like a forum, a communal forum that the class uses, and he was surprised that nobody answered. He had written such a nice message. But I said, but did you tell them that they should answer? So it's possible that the students thought that this forum thing, which was new, was a communication tool from the students or from the teachers to them, and not realize that it could be as a two-way channel. So it's very important. You need to set the guidelines. They can't participate the way you want them if they don't know what it is you want. And we all make this mistake, yeah? So tell them, what should they do? Mute their mics, raise their hands to talk. Can they speak freely? Should they use the chat box? Whatever the rules are. Video, for example, is maybe more in the participation rules. Should they have their video on or off? This is very important. There are pros and cons or whatever, but for example, video, you see me now, it does create a sense of connection with the person. It's my voice, okay, and the PowerPoint would work too, but having that video, it is the physical, we have this visual reminder, this person there in front of us. So if you want to build a team and build a community in a sense of we're all in this together, having the video on, at least when they speak, is very important. Mine don't like it. They're at home, they go, I'm in my pajamas. I go, well, don't wear your pajamas next week, get dressed, But I say to them, well, when you're giving a presentation or when you're giving your answer, you must put your camera on. Other than that, you can turn it off or something. You can make compromises, but it is important if that's what you want. I wanted it because I had a big group. So the other things could be what is from the school, for example. Are they allowed to record the lesson? Some people want to record it and watch it later, but maybe it might be against the rules of wherever you are, privacy rules. So where I am, for example, in the school, that they don't allow it. The students are not allowed to record the live sessions. Yeah. So you have to check. These would be rules. And also having rules, very important with young people and children, very clearly. And those rules should be repeated again and again and possibly shared with the parents too, Things won't go well unless everybody knows what's expected of them. So I was going to say, you might want to include for the kids things about how respectful communication with one another. Sometimes people in the chat box, I had university students, but sometimes they'd be writing and making jokes about it, that wasn't really appropriate for the situation, making jokes about someone else's contribution, things like that. So these are things, respectful communication, important to include. When you are in the classroom, you can give the look, this be quiet. What are you up to? That look. Yeah. We can't do it. It's not as effective online because they don't know who you're giving the evil eye to, who you're giving the look to, So we have to rely on different methods. Okay. So the chat box is something that I use all the time, absolutely for everything. Some communication in the classroom, a lot of communication in the classroom is spontaneous. Yeah, think about it. You tell them there's a test and they all groan. Yeah, or someone says something funny and people laugh. You know what I mean? It's visual, it's spontaneous. Or you say something and somebody thinks of a funny joke or a witty comment to make. When we go online, we lose a lot of that because students are thinking, oh, teacher speaks and then we'll call one of us and one of us will speak. There's no spontaneity. Yeah. The chat box could be a solution to keeping an element of that spontaneity. Many teachers just use it as a means for them to give corrections. I think that's an absolute mistake. The chat box should be the back channel, the communication going on, the questions, the comments, etc. And on a communication tool to ask everybody very quickly, like we've done here, how do you feel about this, Exactly. And then it gives the chance to have a bit of spontaneity, in the classroom. The feedback channel, how are people feeling? If somebody didn't understand something, they can write it in the chat box. Question and answer, as I've done earlier, where are you? Who are you teaching? And you all wrote the answers. Also, you can have a completely written discussion using the chat box, which is very interesting thing to try. We're not all speakers, I'm a speaker, and I'm not a writer, maybe, I don't know. But some people prefer to write than speak. We all have students who are just not the people who will shout out the answers in class. So by making them communicate verbally, we're actually putting them at a disadvantage. Yet when we're all online, you have this great tool, the chat box. You can have a completely written discussion where you write the questions or you post up the questions one by one and they write and then they can answer each other. They read and answer, and you could turn it into a very, very interesting tool that gives everyone the chance to communicate in a different way. When you're writing, you have time to think and plan your answer, and it suits sort of the quieter ones or the ones who just prefer writing, yeah? So think about that. That would be a way of using the tool to change something, to enhance. We don't normally have written discussions in the face-to-face classroom. So this is something we could try. So I'm a huge chat box fan anyway, which leads me to the next part. What are the advantages of synchronous, like real time, same time, text-based communication? A lot of people see it as, why would I do that? We're using Skype or whatever it is, Zoom, we're talking. However, there are many, many advantages to using the chat box at the same time, or, 50-50 or whatever. So you have a written record, which is very useful for revision. Many of the tools allow you to download the whole chat. You have the whole conversation there in a document. Multiple people can talk at the same time. When I ask a question, instead of saying, okay, John, now you, okay, Sandra, now you, Sarah, over to you, now I can ask the question and everyone can answer at the same time. So it definitely increases interaction. I lost a word here. Allows for informal chat is what I wanted to write. I ate my chat. I don't know what happened there. Yeah, it's something a little bit more informal. Yeah, most of the work we get them to write in class is write an email, write a report, write an essay. This is a different type of communication, which is more and more important in our daily lives. So this is a chance for you to practice with them, train them, informal chat style, SMS style communication. Quiet students can participate. It gives everyone more time to think. You're not jumping on a student for an answer, and it increases writing practice. Yeah, it allows participation when speaking is not possible. Very good. Other things for increasing interaction, of course, are polls, as we use today, surveys and quizzes. Somebody mentioned quizzes. Surveys, for example, Google Forms does it, Microsoft Forms. You can send them the link in the chat box and they can fill out the survey that you've prepared or the quiz, and then you can share the answers. And then feedback. Feedback is very important. Feedback is something that we should be really, your feedback to them, they're to you as well. Feedback is something that we can all increase much more. Ask them at the end, what did you like today? What was good? What did you not like? We miss the classroom face-to-face. We can't read the room. So you use feedback to give you a much better understanding of how they're managing. Yeah. Okay, very good. The reason I think feedback is so important is because, learning is essentially a social activity. Yeah. As Swan said, I agree 100%. Communication and collaboration are essential. And we are in it together. It's the teacher and the students. It's not the one way. So the feedback from them, from me to them, and even them to each other are all parts of this social learning. Some tools allow for breakout rooms and some don't. And even if it is technically possible, it's not always appropriate. I mean, maybe with small, young students, you don't want to put them in breakout rooms. It might be chaos. I don't know. I'm not working with the young learners anymore. So we don't always sometimes we have easy solutions, sometimes not. But we still should think about how we can use technology to find ways of including it. Okay, very good. So the benefits, of course, of pair work and group work are very clear. Increased participation, increased speaking time. We have collaborative learning. Somebody mentioned it already in the chat. We can have time to practice in a smaller circle before we do it for the big group. That's very good to help us. And we take responsibility for the learning. Can't just sit back and listen to the teacher. We've got to do something. We've got to be responsible for our learning. Also, students love it in general. Okay, maybe not at the beginning. Some of them are like, I don't, individual. But in general, students like the peer and the group work. And yeah, the sense of community among learners and among the group. The more they work together, the more they feel like a team. Okay, very good. we're kind of coming to the end now. We're kind of talking a little bit more about the learning and the methodologies, etc. So remember that the true direction of development of thinking is not from the individual to the social, but the social to the individual. Meaning, like, it's not me, I didn't come up with a great idea and then I go out into the world, but I observe the world, I interact with others, and this is where learning and, ideas come from. So it shouldn't be individual. We should really try and work this group and peer group, individual or pair work in as much as possible into our learning, even when we're online and we think it's not possible. Yeah. If they can't do pair work in the lesson, why don't you make it homework? Assign them a task, get them to do it outside of the class time. And then when you're in the class time, one of them or the two of them can take turns to present what they did. So don't exclude pair work just because it doesn't work on the tool that you're using. You could even cut short your class by 15 minutes and let them do it then, and then the next week present. But try to think, how can I keep, if it's important for me, how can I add it to my online teaching? So that goes back to the idea earlier about thinking, how do you teach? Okay, peer feedback. So the key, it isn't easy, it's hard, but I think the clue is, the key is the rubrics. Give them the rubrics, the marking criteria, whatever it is, the way you would mark and decide something is good, you share that with them at the end. You can give them the rubrics or they can create their own. In my last group, students, they were giving presentations and I got them to design the rubrics, and then we shared them and we picked the best things from each one, and we made, they picked out the points that were important, and then we gave a marking scale. Very simple. You can find so much online about this, but really it was a turning point for me, because I said, really, they knew from the beginning what they had to do to get the top marks, rather than it being this like, oh, I don't know, arbitrary thing. It was more transparent. So create the rubrics you and share them with them, or let them do it. It can even be a checklist. It doesn't have to be, did the student do this? Yes. Did they do this? Yeah, no, For smaller students, you can use symbols or emojis. Yeah, a sheet. One kid gives a little presentation and the others have a little sheet with emojis on it. And then they have to, for the information, how do you feel? Was the information interesting? Smiley, whatever, no, not so smiley. So that's useful. Don't just say, my students are kids, they can't do it. There's always ways. Very good. Another idea is, if it's online, that you give them a document or whatever with some comments written, and then they can copy and paste the comments in. They pick the comment they want and copy it in, so that they don't have to write the whole comment out. It could be simple, like good vocab, good presentation style, a nice intro, whatever it was, whatever the task is. So peer feedback is something that we can include. We don't have to just say, oh, it's not for me. Okay, very good. Group work is, I think it's brilliant. I love it. Hard when we're online, of course, it works differently. We have to figure out ways around it, either asking them to do it outside of the classroom time and then present in the online classroom, where they have a little Skype call themselves and then present, or breakout rooms if you have it, whatever method. There's lots of different ways that we can do it. Some people have, I know students who they did all their collaboration on a WhatsApp chat, which I hadn't even thought about, but I thought it was good use of technology. So effective group work. For it to succeed, there are different things you have to do. You must explain the benefits of group work to the class. If you want to get the buy-in, you want to get them involved, you have to explain to them what the advantages are. Otherwise, they see it as, some people are individualists, and they go, oh, I don't want to work with them, I'm better on my own. But explain the benefits. If, there's so many, we'll talk about them in a minute. Connect the task, whatever group work task, to your goals or your outcomes for the course. Yeah, so make sure it's linked. It's not just this extra thing that they go, why are we doing this? Make sure they see the connection to what the goals are. Assign partners in advance, especially if it's younger children. Otherwise, your class will be chaotic as they, online, as they're trying to figure out who's partner. First, assign the partners and then give the instructions. Very important. I did the other way around and no one was listening to me because they were thinking, oh, who am I going to partner with? Explain the tasks and the evaluation process clearly, whatever the rubrics are, as we mentioned earlier. Here again, maybe they make the rubrics. Present models, very important. If you want them to give a presentation, you got to show them good presentations so they know what they can aspire to. Make written instructions available. They will forget. You said it 20 times, but you know, they weren't listening. So written instructions are great. Share the guidelines for group interaction, what you expect, how they should behave. It definitely isn't one person doing all the work and the others sitting back. So what you expect, and of course, practice, practice, practice. Group work, it might not work the first time or the second or the third, but it will get better and they'll get better at it. Okay, so as I mentioned, the benefits of group work and this type of communication can be very clearly linked to the CEFR. And most of us language teachers use the CEFR for our guidelines, or here for orientation, feedback, and reflection. The CEFR can be fantastic. I use it an awful lot in all my work with telc. The telc exams are all based on it. So when we're writing, we know what the goals are. What are we thinking? What is the purpose of this task? Because we're very familiar with the CEFR. Common European Framework of Reference. I should have mentioned that. So for us here in Europe, it's clear, it's the guiding principle for everything. Here are some examples that you could use to show students why group work is important. Because language is more than just grammar and vocab. Language communication is about cooperating, taking the floor, turn taking, goal-oriented cooperation. So these are just 3 examples of some of the descriptors in the CEFR. And you can see I picked B2 level, but obviously depending on the level you're teaching, you would find the descriptor and find out what should they be able to do. So I would say to my students, okay, at B2 level, you should be able to help the discussion along on familiar ground. I'm not asking you to talk about something you've no idea of. Confirming comprehension, inviting other people in. So were you doing that in your discussion? Were you able to say, yes, I understood. Yeah, I got, oh, so you mean this? Yeah, what do you feel about this? Yeah, taking the floor. Can you intervene appropriately in a discussion using the right language? Yeah, can you end the discourse appropriately? So the turn taking, yeah, and they will. I'm just giving you this as an example, of course, but it's just to help students see there is so much more to language learning than just learning a list of words and learning off some grammar rules, yeah? That all of these things are very important too. And that helps back up your argument for group work, pair work, peer feedback. They see goal-oriented cooperation. This would be the peer feedback. Can you outline an issue or a problem clearly, speculating about causes or consequences, weighing advantages and disadvantages of different approaches? So, you know, I can see what you're saying. I can give you good feedback. I could see the problem in your, I could give some advantages and disadvantages. Okay, the final, yeah, can you believe it? Reflect. These are a little summary of all my main points. Think about the technology when we're teaching online. It's about how we teach. The technology is just the tool. Yeah, the technologies will change, but the method teaching online, the methods you use, the approaches will stay the same. So reflecting on my talk today, be kind to yourself. Practice, practice, practice. Practice makes perfect. None of us are experts. Adapt. Don't fight it. It's here to stay. So think, how can I adapt my teaching? How can I use the tool to adapt to the way I want it? Consider your style. What is your style of teaching? Support the struggling learners. Connect with them, you know, do all you can. It won't be the same one-to-one and online. You may need more time to look after the learners. SAMR, just to remind you about how you can use the tool. Increase your participation. Step away from the millions of handouts and worksheets. I know it was easy and that's what helped a lot of people, but participation is how we learn. Have clear guidelines, everything you want them to do. Think, even if you've told them 10 times, put it in writing, give it to them again. Allow for spontaneity. It's the heart, I think, of learning. The spontaneity is what we love, is what makes learning fun. Pair up your students, build community. Make them feel like a group. Even if they're online and they're all over the place, sitting on their own in their rooms, they are part of a learning community. Build that community. Give feedback for all. You to them to you, them to each other. And use the CEFR. It'll give you lots of guidelines. So that is it for me. Find your way. That's my last message. Yeah.
Maybe I can go forward a little bit to my slide. Like, of course, there are already some online products, not only from telc, but yeah, especially at telc, we are putting a lot of effort at the moment into developing digital products and turning the materials into a digital format to use it via a webinar tool like this or in your online classroom. So just to show you the products we have already converted into digital ebooks, you can go to our telc shop and we have a new category, digital products. So maybe you can have a look at it. And I think this week, the new training for, especially for medicine topics, for the medicine exam, will be digitalized too. So yeah, it will be updated the whole time now. So yeah, it's worth to have a look at these ebooks. And yeah, I'm sure other publishing houses have digital products now as well.
Yeah. It is, yeah. So everybody's moving in the top, we know what's happening. We're all going in that direction. Thank you, everybody. I just think the tools can offer us so much and we shouldn't let ourselves be restricted, but it takes time and don't, take it step by step, but everything's possible. That was my final message.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much to everyone and especially to you, Laura. So thank you and goodbye.